7:01.
You want to look at this?
Oh,
No,
I don't
I'm
have my
going to find
screen.
it, damn it.
Oh, no, that's- There it is. Oh, I did not. Okay, good evening, everybody. I'm Janet Evans, Chair of the CA Board of Directors. Please remember that this meeting is being live streamed. You can find tonight's agenda and background materials on the CA Board's webpage, and links to those documents can also be found in the description section of our YouTube live stream for those of you watching there. If you are virtual, please mute your microphones or phones unless speaking. Raise your hand to speak. I will record names in the order in which I see them. If you are virtual, please use the chat feature. As we move through the meeting, I will introduce each item on the agenda. Before, there were no votes tonight. If at any point you have trouble hearing me or another board member, please say so. And I will now call the roll. Andy.
Present.
Sherry.
Here.
Ginny.
Here.
Dick.
Here.
Lynn.
Here.
Tina.
Here.
Jess. Here. Alan.
Here.
Renee.
Here.
Lakey.
Here.
And me. Thank you very much. All right, tonight's timekeeper is Ginny Thomas. Can I get a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any objections? All right, agenda approved. We have no residents speaking out this evening, so we will move right into the work session topics. So first up is our discussion of the fiscal year 23 budget priorities. We have two sections under this. One, Lakey's going to cover the strategic plan and business model changes, and then we'll go into the material that, the worksheets that Lakey sent out ahead of time, and include in that the summary of what I had sent out, just in terms of a starting point for our discussion. Okay.
Okay, so I guess just as a quick framework, tonight's session was a, added session that was meant to have a focus on budget priorities based on board feedback and discussion that had happened. There was a desire to have an additional session, and I would say the other feedback included the idea that the board didn't feel like they had a lot of interaction at the beginning of the budget process and wanted to kind of set the framework around priorities as a starting point. And also, as we discussed internally, the desire from the board to have more scenario building involved in the process. We really needed to have some conceptual agreement at the outset, and that's what tonight is really about. So the exercises that were sent out, as I indicated, were really, as staff, mainly myself, Lynn Schwartz, Director of Finance, and then Susan Krabby, CFO, and then some of the department heads talked about what would really be constructive for us to know at the beginning. And that's really where the exercises and activities came from, was how to kind of frame your thoughts, think through what the options might be. So what I thought I would do is just start out by articulating the ideas behind suggesting the strategic plan and the business model changes, and then really it's just discussion from there. So the board has an adopted strategic plan. It is often referenced as something that, staff efforts get tied back to, that programs get tied back to. So we thought, obviously the budget documents have referenced it, but there seemed to be a real desire to make sure at the outset we were thinking about the strategic plan and how do we want to resource that strategic plan. And that's really kind of what we want feedback on tonight, thoughts on tonight. And, most everyone here was directly involved in that. But irregardless, I think, the key categories just for the people that are listening: identity, resource stewardship, environmental sustainability, leadership development, and advocacy. The second piece that we kind of combined for the discussion this evening is this idea of business model changes. So this is something that has come up with the board as well, and we wanted to really push this to the front of the process and ask the question, what are any kind of significant or, quote unquote, disruptive changes that might be worth actually building a scenario out around? So I do want to be clear here that when we talk about business model changes, that might impact expenses, but it could also impact revenue, right? So is it new revenue sources? Is it taking, certain expenses offline, stop doing services? So there's a lot of different ways to kind of think about that. I did want to make sure to point out that part of what we talked about in our ability to do scenarios in-house is, depending on what it is, it might be one budget cycle, it might be, 3 years that something would have to close over or open over. So, in this discussion, it would be helpful to have some thought around that really is a multi-year process. Obviously, some of these might impact operating or capital budget or both. And then lastly, it's not listed here, but I wanted to make sure to mention that if there are an abundance of ideas, then we would like to make sure that as part of our discussion tonight, we perhaps take some kind of vote and prioritize. We feel like we can only really run out 3 true scenarios if they are really full alternates to the way the budget is done. We just don't have a capacity to run, 27 at once. So we feel like 3 seems very reasonable, so we would want to try and get some consensus around that this evening if we can. So those were really the framing thoughts, and we really just want to open the floor. Again, this was for the board to start the process, and we're going to be taking a lot of notes, and that's really what's going to inform, again, going back to our process. We're in the listening, collection stage, and then we'll be shifting into staff analysis and starting to synthesize that and scenario build. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So I think we all know this is a little bit tough to have these conversations simply because we want to start up here. And I think what Lakey sent out is a great place to try to have that conversation.
We have some people who did sign up for residents beyond the got marked as spam. We're sending them the information now so they can join. We'll let you know.
Oh, okay.
Add it to the chat.
Thank you. All right. So it turns out we did have some residents speak out that went to spam. So we will be adding them as soon as they're available. In the meantime, I did just share with you all the summary of what I had sent out. And that was basically just the must do, should do, nice to do. And I think the results are quite interesting. I don't know if I could share this up there or not. Can I? Okay. So let's just take a quick look. Oh, yeah. So sorry, I know it's very teeny because there you can't. Google Forms is not very conducive to creating readable reports, but we can start over here. I will increase the size. Okay, so clearly open space has long been an important topic for all of us, and the majority of the board indicated that it's a must-do, and those that didn't indicate must-do indicated should-do. So that's a pretty big one. And similarly, sustainability ranked in the same place. The only one that got unanimous agreement was the annual charge. Obviously, we would not exist without the annual charge, so I'm glad we all see it that way. But so clearly there's also some discussion on some of these other ones. I think what maybe makes sense is taking just a couple of minutes on each one and talking about, and I'm also open to suggestions if someone has a better way to structure this. I'm just going to put this out there. But I think I just want to do a quick run through of this. And so if anyone has a significant comment about why they might have thought something was a nice to do versus a must do, I'm open to that. I guess I'm curious on things like tot lots. Well, that was sort of distributed. School age services also distributed. So I'm curious, I think when I see those, I wonder if we're thinking different things about them. Yeah, Andy.
So I'd just like to add, I found it a little difficult to fill out.
Yeah.
And part of it is because must do, should do, and nice to do, I think have various different meanings to people and to me. I can tell you that from my point of view, I looked at must do. Must do means mandated. We have to do it.
Gotcha.
And if you look at the list, I mean, in my view, it was just, there are only 3 things we have to do, basically legal. The annual charge of board of directors administration. Everything else is kind of like, yeah, we should do, or it's nice to do. So it got to be a little bit difficult. Do I like school age services? Yes, and I think it's important. But I don't think there's anything mandating us to do it. And so I found it a little difficult to fill out the chart, so.
That's a very fair comment. Thank you. Sherry, and then Tina.
I think Alan.
Oh, sorry, Alan. Go ahead. I don't know. Alan, and then, so Alan, go ahead, Alan, and then Sherry, and then Tina.
Okay, thank you. I guess I would take a step back, and for me, and I think first I want to thank the staff for having this and us for having this meeting. This is something we haven't done in all the years I've been on the board. For me, I tried to apply larger criteria to each one of them. So for me, it was things like what serves the most people, what serves the most diverse group of people, what serves the creation of community within the city, and sort of as a up there, but a little bit secondary, what is it that we can do that others don't or can't do as well, or even cheaper and better than we might be doing. So that's why for me, open space, tot lots, sustainability is sort of a must because it's the world. Applies to everything. School age services to me was community building, and we hit a wide variety of kids with that and families. Things like sports and fitness and other things were more on the should do or nice to do because there are others who can do those things. And maybe it's better for us to start deciding what we really focus on. That's it for now.
Thank you, Alan. Sherry?
Yeah, I guess unlike Andy, I was not taking a legalistic perspective on it. I was looking at our mission and our vision as tied into our strategic plan. And so what jumped out at me, thinking about a diverse community, thinking about quality of life, thinking about evolving needs. And we've got the word dynamic and inclusive. So I think those are really, really important drivers as we look out to the future, because this way of looking at the budget, Lakey, I think you said this at one of our meetings, it's about values, that a budget represents values. And our identity is sort of a little split now. We've got the customer of the memberships, and we've got the stakeholders who are the lien payers. And over time, there has been an ongoing tension between the needs, in effect, of these two groups. So that's a little bit of what we have to take into consideration here also, in terms of where we sense our drivers, our sense not only of the economic drivers and the financial drivers, but our responsibility and our authority.
Thank you. Tina?
Thank you. I want to echo what Alan said about, seeing how many different, I think of them as barriers to entry, and how many of those can we remove? And I also, in filling out the form, would have valued a stop doing this button to pick. But I think this will absolutely seed some great conversation.
Lakey?
I'm just going to make a blanket statement that there's a reason that there weren't definitions of must, should, do, right? So everybody kind of interpret it. And Tina, as you said, we kind of had that idea of keep, stop, start, modify. So they certainly were meant to kind of get you thinking in a lot of different ways, depending on what kind of thinker you might be.
Thank you. And I will say, I approached it similarly to Alan in terms of, I looked at must-dos as, what do I feel like we must do as the organization that we are? So I think that was a similar. All right. Any more comments on that particular one? We don't have to continue sharing this. So you all have this document. You can take a look at how your peers responded.
Did you email that, Janet?
I just shared it right now because as of this afternoon, only 6 people had responded, and since then 9 have. So,
Gotcha. Okay.
So I updated it and then shared it. So yes, you just got it.
Okay.
So I don't know how many of you filled out the priority order. For me, that was a more brutal exercise from the standpoint of like, oh, when you have to rank it above something else, I kept moving things around. So I don't know if anyone would like to comment on if they did their priority order, how that may or may not have influenced your thinking. Yeah, Dick.
I was kind of interested when we started on this discussion about how we were going to do the budget. And when I saw where we were heading, I have to say I was a bit disappointed. I don't think we got anything actionable out of that last chart. I mean, it doesn't tell us what we're going to do. It doesn't tell us, it doesn't put dollar figures on anything. It doesn't, and the priority list, I mean, you have something like open space, well, that could be dredging lakes, it could be pathways, it could be mowing the lawn. I mean, we had a lot of apples in there, we had a lot of oranges in there, and I'm just wondering if we should rethink this whole process. I don't really like where this is going. It's hard to make judgments about things without knowing what the dollar signs are. It's difficult to prioritize things when you don't really have a narrow definition of what it is. And I think about where, one of the biggest items we have right now is, of course, all the programs. We do sports and fitness, the arts center, the horse center, the golf courses, all these things. And we get a vote on that by our members. They vote with their feet. They either show up or they don't show up. And they do that every day. And we have a very talented staff that measures who's doing what and when and why and how. And if nobody's showing up for a class or something, that gets taken off the schedule. So what our board policy is to create a smorgasbord of activities and events and programs. And it should be widespread. We have a very diverse community out there. Some people like to ride horses. Some people like to make pots over at the Art Center. Some people like to play golf. Some people like to go swimming. Some people are on swim teams. I mean, we got it all there, and we know what's popular and what's not popular. We know what the community wants just from usage. Now, maybe things come up that will, maybe we should try out. And, that's good. But you're not going to get it off of charts like this. And I really think we ought to be thinking of a different way of approaching this.
Thank you. Alan?
Yeah, I guess I sort of see it a little bit differently. To me, it is the large, to me, there's an underlying question is what do we think everybody in Columbia ought to help pay for?
Bingo.
And that we need to be thinking about, and we could use the values that we talked about before when we did our retreat a couple months ago. But I think that's something we need to like, because when you say people vote with their feet, well, a lot of the things, Dick, that you mentioned they are expenses, but they have dollar signs coming back too in revenue. Mm-hmm. People pay to use the horse farm. People pay to use sports and fitness, et cetera. And so to me, there's a distinction between, so one of our questions is what do we as a board insist be fully paid for by fees, and what are we willing to charge everybody in Columbia for? Mm-hmm. And that's why I go to the large questions of trying to sort of create a set of criteria that I can apply, and hopefully through discussion we'll create it for the board and we can apply to make that decision of what everybody should pay for. The side piece that I want to mention now that I don't want to distract us in this particular part of the discussion, but I think is really important. When I see villages listed alongside sports and fitness, community services, open space, et cetera, mm-hmm. it bothers me because there's a real question, if we were to say annual charge funding of villages is something we're not going to do, does that mean we really believe in our heart of hearts that that's revenue that CA is going to keep and will use? Or would we reduce our annual charge concomitantly so that villages could then start charging themselves? So to me, the whole question of villages is its own separate thing that needs to be discussed.
Renee? It's Renee. Renee's up and then you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay, so I'm going to look at this. I agree with what you've said, Alan. I agree with some of what you've said, Dick. I agree with almost a little bit of what almost everyone has said. But I don't see any thinking out of the box, even with the questions. I think we all know that we're sitting here looking at sports and fitness, although we're not. But it's losing a lot of money, and it's being financed with assessment money. Now, I'm not strictly opposed to that, but what I don't see is staff or whoever, we have to hire consultants, taking a real deep dive looking at this. We now have competitors in Howard County to the gyms, between 30 and 50, depending upon how you define competitor. We now have competitors to the golf courses. Within an acceptable driving distance, there's almost 60 golf courses. We now have competitors to our indoor tennis facilities. We have competitors to tennis. So my question is a couple of things. If we take the current situation with sports and fitness and project it out 10 years, where's our break even? Are we looking at these losses for 8 years, 10 years, 2 weeks? Where is that? How long are we going to let sports and fitness go as it is? Or do we need to look at the structure of it? I'm not saying close it, but do we need to restructure it? Do we need to, and under what guidelines do we restructure? The other thing is we got a wonderful spreadsheet or report from Dennis about capital expenditures out 10 years, but not included in it were capital expenditures for neighborhood centers, but now neighborhood centers could possibly come up again. I think to really look at the budget, we have to look at what, if we threw everything into the pot, neighborhood centers, swimming pools, whatever, what does it really cost us over 10 years to operate this stuff, to maintain it? As far as capital renovations, what is the real cost? We don't really know that number yet. I'm going to tell you that right now. We don't know that number. What is the real cost of sports and fitness? Okay, if it continues to run, I mean, we're financing about 6,500 resident memberships. Okay, that's 6%, 7%. That's not a great deal of people. That doesn't mean that it can't be successful. It means that it's not successful. Okay, when you only have that market penetration, the number of 19%, that's not success. What do we have to do to get the market penetration up? Do we have to change the programs? Do we have to clean up the assets, make them more current? Because some of them look very dated. What do we have to do to be successful? Maybe it's not tennis, maybe it's badminton. I don't know what the next sport is, but we have to start thinking in the future and put away the past. And I don't see the material here to do any of that.
Ginny, then Dick, then Lynn.
Okay. I guess one of the ways I'd like to see us think about approaching the budget, and this is one way, is really get an idea or the data on what exactly our fixed costs are that we have absolutely no say in. The headquarters, utilities, whatever. That's it. We either come up with it or we're in trouble. All right, and then I would add to that, do we want to subsidize income qualified individuals, which is about $1 million in the budget? Or do we want to look at why the county maybe should be helping with that? So what are the things that and what will it cost? What does it actually cost? So we know if we get $63 million in revenue, already 23 million is accounted for, or 10 million, whatever the figure is. So we're really only talking about the remainder. We're not talking about the whole annual charge, 63 million or whatever it'll amount to in the next budget. That's more reality is what I'd like to work with on that. And then as I put in the income qualified, because that's sort of a real major decision. That is costing you X amount of dollars. Is that a role for CA? Is this another decision we have to make? Then go on from there with all these other things, and that's kind of difficult to really weigh one against the other, and especially when we talk about golf. Are we talking about the 2 existing golf courses and they're not going to change? Or are we talking about it's costing us X number of dollars, but we will be looking at maybe, a different way of utilizing the golf courses or providing golf service or something like that. It's hard to really figure out what we're doing other than are we talking about these are the costs on the current budget? They'll be pretty much the cost plus an increase in the next budget. And that's how we say whether that's a priority or not. It's interesting. Thank you. Oh, and partners, I'm sorry, last thing. Partners, there's no discussion here that a lot of these things, are we really going to look at, well, maybe it shouldn't just be CA. Maybe we should be looking at how we can get the county involved or something else, or partnering with other groups that'll save us some money, but yet we can provide that service. Thank you.
So Dick, you're next in the queue, but what I'd like to do is pause here and go back to resident speak out, if everyone's good with that. So Joel Horowitz has joined, and Joel, are you with us?
Yes, good evening.
Hello, welcome.
3 minutes, right?
Apparently you have some technical and communication issues.
Joel, if you could please state your name and village for the record.
Joel Hurwitz from Harper's Choice. I saw the Facebook comment about Tot Lot and surprised I'm the only one talking about that, even though apparently it's a big issue from attending some of the Hickory Ridge meetings. First of all, I don't understand why you're wedded to tot lots, because for those who fail to learn from history, then repeat it, you're going to keep making tot lots. Why not have lots for older children and even adults with some of the places? I find that your objective criteria, I felt, didn't have enough points to take into account all the things you should be. Considering the number of children from the census and the school polygon data, because there's some polygons that there are actually no children in because they're suppressed and they're less than 10 or they're less than 20 if they're on the data. So you should take into account that, not be building it where you have no kids. You should take into account the proximity to the other playgrounds from the schools and from the Hoco parks. And for example, the proximity to Blandair should be taken into account for the ones closest to it, because that's in walking distance, a couple of the ones. The community parks with parking at the neighborhood center should also be totally different. They should be larger and be considered a community amenity, not the same as the ones that you only reach on the pathways. I saw a family bring their 2 kids to the Swansfield Neighborhood Center by car. So those should be totally different, and I don't see any discussion about that. There's different options at different parks because the kids and the parents might like things different, so I'm afraid they're all going to get the same. I guess during the summer, slides can be too hot. The Rascal, that's as a model, seems nice for someone's backyard, but not for a community park. But why do they need all the big expensive play equipment? Why don't you use the Robinson Nature Center as an example, which apparently is well received from the internet comments, with tree stump steppers, a hollowed out log to climb in and on, and a buried tunnel culvert, which apparently costs less than $400 at Tractor Supply. And why not have some ninja climbing equipment, which the Hoco Parks seem to have from the pictures. I haven't visited them at Blandair. And as I said, apparently for the adults, why not some exercise equipment that's at Cedar Lane and Holiday Hills, which according to the county's Facebook post when they opened up Holiday Hills, it says has something for everyone with great exercise equipment, a large expensive playground, swings, and a climbing wall for the kids. So as I said, I think you need to expand your criteria and be more flexible, and so I hope that can be added to the discussion.
Thank you, Joel. Any questions for Joel? We appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
All right. Did we have any additional residents? Okay, I think we're good. If not, we might have to take another little break. So, okay. Thank you, everyone. So back to the budget commentary. Dick, you were next up.
People keep talking about getting help from the county. That's really a dead end. The county's a competitor of ours. They have their own programs to run. They really, I mean, they're nice people. We cooperate with them in a lot of ways. But to expect them to support our programs when they've got their own programs, I think that's a little expecting too much. The key thing here is the programs that we offer, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. What's important is that we have this huge collection of things that makes Columbia special. And these are things that the entire community has a shot at, can use. Maybe if they don't use it, they think they're going to use it. We offer competitive pricing for our members, for our residents. And this is one of the reasons why Columbia is such a great place to live. And I worry about the board getting into the weeds. Our position should be, we want to have a diverse program that is of value to our residents and to our lien payers. That's where it is. We've got a very capable staff that can put together that program, and then if we want to get in and nitpick this or that, we can do that, but let's let them take a shot at it. They're the ones who have the data, they're the ones who have the expertise, and they're the ones who have the time. Another factor here I think should be mentioned is all of this money is kind of fungible. It's difficult to say when somebody buys a Fit and Play membership what they're buying for. I mean, they might want the sports park for their kids. They might want the swimming pools. It's not always easy to pick apart what they're getting. And if we started pricing things individually, that just that takes away the simplicity of what we do. Here's, we have these packages and this is what comes with it. And even the people who don't take advantage of some of the things that we have to offer, this improves their property values because these are services that make Columbia attractive to people. So I guess in summary, what I'm trying to say is let's not overthink this. I think there's a better way to attacking the budget than trying to figure out how many tot lots we have or any of these questions. These are not board questions.
Thank you. Lynn?
Yeah, when I was looking at this, and again, looking at the priorities, we've been through our visioning, our strategies for how we're going to implement our vision, our messages. But then I thought, I'm doing it this way. What would my village board say? I thought about the 5 members of our village board. They all come from very different places. They've been here different times. I think it would be really a good exercise to take this form back to our village boards and have them fill it out. I would love to see the difference in the answers. Where do they put their priorities? I just think I think we should broaden this to at least include some response, at least for our own purposes from our villages.
We have about 3 minutes left. What did you take out? Okay, I had myself in the queue, so I just wanted to say a couple of things. One, I'm going back to Alan's point about what I had written down even before Alan spoke was subsidized and self-sustaining. What things do we think our community value that we feel that the annual charge should be supporting? And what things do we offer that are of benefit to our residents, but that should be paying for themselves? So that was one thing. Two, the question of financing sports and fitness, I've always been curious to see what these numbers look like without allocating all of the overhead expenses of CA's operations to every organization. So, I don't know if there's some opportunity for us to have either like profit and loss statement for individual facilities. Obviously, that wouldn't apply to something like, it could apply to open space, so we know what that would look like. But things like the gyms, the art center, the tennis center, the horse center, all of those things, and understanding really, how many people are using it versus what we're paying for it or how much of their own costs that they cover. So, I think, and Dick, to your point, I don't see how we can't start up here, because if we expect staff to put something together without us providing any values to them, then we are getting in the weeds, because then we nitpick the numbers after the fact. So I think what the whole board said last year, minus Tina, of course, but what the board said last year was that they wanted more input at the beginning, and that was the whole genesis of just having the values discussion, was to start talking about how do we want to apply these dollars and look at it that way. So I don't see any option except to have a values discussion. And to do that, we have to start at the higher level and then work our way down. And so anyway, okay, so we have on the list Lakey, Sherry, Jess, Tina, Alan, Andy, and then Dick.
Well, we're going to go over then.
Well, did you take out for resident speak out?
Yeah.
I just want to say I was in the queue before Joel spoke.
Yeah. Oh, I'm
So
sorry, Jess.
I keep getting
I keep
bumped.
pointing to it.
I just,
Okay, I didn't see you. 'cause I didn't
okay,
write you down.
okay. Starting to think it was personal. You know?
Maybe we just blend it together. But, okay.
So this is all total. Yeah, let's do that. Okay. All right.
Am I going or is Jessica?
No, you can go.
Okay.
Because-
Let's arm wrestle. No, I'm just kidding.
No. So I wanted to make one clarifying statement and then I guess be a little, perhaps put a finer point on what would be a helpful outcome for staff this evening. As a clarifying statement, again, as the cover email said, these weren't assignments that, were required to do. They were different ways to think about it. I want to say that so far, I haven't gotten anything that we're able to take action with as staff. So I just want to be mindful of the time, and I have no problem if everyone wants to take the exercise and wad up the piece of paper and throw them away. That's fine. We're all sitting here. What would be constructive that you want staff to know? So on that note, I have heard things like serve the most number of people, serve the greatest diversity of people, do things that create community, do things that create quality of life. What are those definitions? Because I'm hearing very diverse ideas. I also heard the greatest number of things is what we need to do because that delivers service to people. So what is going to be most constructive for staff to be able to put scenarios together for you to then decide what you want to move forward is definitely going to be, what is the priority? Is it a sheer, this is the greatest number of people? Is it a sheer, we need to more closely track demographics, which, obviously it's going to be difficult to do that on who uses open space on a day-to-day basis. But if that's something that's important to the organization, we're going to figure out a way to do that. So those kind of, I would call them filtering questions. It doesn't really matter what you call them, but statements of these are the key priorities, these are the important factors that we then can start to filter against. I do want to be clear that, reference was made that no outside the box thinking has been put forward. The staff purposely has not put anything forward. That is exactly what this meeting was the board said we want to start at the beginning and not have staff put anything forward. So any outside the box idea you want to put forward, my understanding was that now is the time to do that for us then to go do the scenario building. So just some clarification.
Thank you. Jess and then Sherry.
Yeah, I kind of, some of what you said, Lakey, was sort of what I was going to say, which was I feel like we are getting in the weeds, and the point of the exercise was not to really talk about like how we're going to do the budget, but just to apply the values to the things that are there. So when we started the conversation, my initial thought was having that discussion about what are the things that we can all agree on that the annual charge should cover. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's a nice starting point. And I think it's pretty fair to say that, what we hear from residents and surveys from 10 years ago up to now is open space, outdoor pools. And so I think, and then sort of trying to, I know we haven't created our document for filtering things, but looking at those values, trust, stewardship, financial stability, and community, I believe they were. I was going off memory. And then trying to sort of look through the rest. I mean, to me, there is something to be said for, who agrees that open space is a must-do, and taking a straw vote. And then I think we can prioritize in terms of, which things people should pay for and which should be self-sustaining. And I think that's sort of where the conversation has to start, I think.
Thank you. Sherry?
Now, thank you, Jess, for what you just said, because I think we're actually going to be able to hone in on some general areas that are going to really jump out in terms of where the consensus and commitment is. There was one other thing, and Janet, this keyed for me when you talked about the P&L statements for facilities. One of the things that we've seen over time as the community has aged, repairs and maintenance has eaten up more and more of the budget. And I think that that's something that, that we really have to take a good, hard look at. The same thing was true for lake dredging 10 years ago before we came up for a plan. Every time it would come up, it would shock the entire board and like drive a hole into the budget. Coming up with a master plan for how to do it over time and how to space it out. And I think this speaks to Lakey's point as well, that there are some changes that are not going to be possible in 1 year, 2 year, or maybe we're looking at 5 years. We have to remember that this is about master planning. So I would like somehow to incorporate repairs and maintenance every time we talk about a facility. I would just like to ask people to think about that. Maybe we can get some figures on that. I was recently talking to somebody who was talking about schools and how in the school budgeting, the initial capital cost is one thing that's talked about, but the 30 years of repairs and maintenance doesn't enter into the budget. Right. And we're at a point now where I think we're going to be hard pressed to actually have to do that. So as we look to the future, I just wanted to make sure that that didn't get lost in the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tina?
Thank you. Jess, I also value what you said a lot. I think that's going to be really helpful. Especially the combination of outdoor pools and open space. I'm wondering if I need to just start thinking of those as one thing instead of two things. The other question that I have for us to think about is what's missing from this list? What are we not doing that we need to be doing? And you know, the first thing that I might throw out is something around transit. I have no idea what that looks like. Although my kid just got back from DC and said that the bike share is the greatest thing he's ever seen. So, you know, maybe there are ideas that we can consider, like what's missing also.
Thank you. Alan?
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate what Janet Lakey and Jess said, and others who chimed in as well. Dick, you said we offer attractive prices to residents, and I guess, again, for me, and it is beating a dead horse, but I hope it's a live horse. It's not that we offer those prices, it's that we require all Columbians to pay for that. So that's something we have to decide whether that's something we want to continue doing, if we believe that's takes us to our mission. I think the question of overhead, as long as the overhead is distributed among facilities and programs reasonably, there's always going to be overhead. So even if we sold off our sports and fitness to somebody else, the overhead associated with that would go away, but whoever bought it would have overhead. So I don't see any problem with keeping a reasonable overhead on different parts of what we do. I think it's a wonderful idea for us to take this back to our villages in whatever way we want to, whether that's with our boards or conduct our own survey and so on. But I will say, and I think this may be saying what others have been saying in a slightly different way, I would like to see us have a scenario where our sports and fitness, golf, gyms, move over a relatively short period of time to becoming self-sustaining, required to be self-sustaining in whatever that requires, whether that's changing the pricing structure, whether that's rent, getting an outside operator to come in and we lease the facilities to them, whatever ideas the staff could come up with, however many relatively short number of years it would take to get to self-sustaining. And for me, that's minus the outdoor pools, which to me are part of the community building and service to a wider variety of people. So that's a scenario I'd like to see. I would like to see us start to, it's something we recommend to all the organizations we work with, start tracking those demographics you're not tracking now in whatever way makes sense and work up to it, because if you don't know, then you can't know. And if we want to serve the widest, one of the things I'd like us to know is, are we having differential impact on different parts of the community? And tracking demographics would be a help for that. And I agree that, as final thing, that in any scenario that we have, we need to be more intentional about what our infrastructure maintenance and replenishment, if you will, program is, and make sure that we are funding that at a reasonable level.
Okay, we have Andy, Dick, Renee, Ginny, me, and then Jess.
Wow. So it was an interesting conversation that I've heard from different ideas from different people. I think what might be helpful, if, I know we do economic models, which generally last for 10 years, and they cover a variety of things. But I was wondering if there could be see, I don't know if 10 years makes any sense right now. I mean, that's the problem, given the current thing. But I'm thinking, like, well, maybe 5 years. I mean, just something a little bit longer than 1 year. But I think, like, if we could get like a 5-year projection on the annual charge income. Yeah. Now we know the commercial stuff is going down, but I think we'll probably hear that this year and figure out. But like a 5-year projection on how much money do we actually expect over those 5 years. Another thing is a 5-year projection on the capital budget. If we actually did what Dennis and the other stuff, said, so what really do we need? Right. Not that I necessarily can afford it all. But just an idea, like, for the next 5 years, what do we really need in terms of the capital budget? Right. And then I'd also like a 5-year projection on what I'll call the fixed costs. And in particular for me, that's interest, depreciation, and taxes and insurance. Yeah, because those are like those 3 things we can't get away from. Now, there might be other things too, but those are the 3 big things. And the reason I say that is we don't really have $45 million. Because we have got to take the interest off. We got to take the depreciation off. We got to take the taxes off. So we don't really have $45 million to spend. So what's actually realistic that the money we have to spend? And I think if you take off, like fixed costs. And then another is, would it be possible to do a 5-year projection on administrative costs? Because that's the other big chunk. I'll say administrative and board of directors, because the board of directors cost money. We cost money. But that then kind of gives you an idea of, well, what do you have to play with? Like in terms of for open space, for sports and fitness, for community programs. That gives you a much more realistic idea, I would think, just for me. And I would think that one scenario I would like to see is, what if we just stayed with the current? What would it look like? Okay, if we just, we take the 22 budget and we're going to do 23. Yeah, we're going to keep the same programs, keep the same. So I'd just like to see, what's that going to look like? And then I'd like to see another one that kind of follows a little bit of what Alan said is, what if we looked at the different divisions that offer services and said, what would it take, what if they had to cover their operating costs minus the fixed cost and minus the administrative allocation? So what would happen if sports and fitness had to cover all their operating costs? What if school-age services had to cover all of their operating costs, not the fixed and not the administrative allocation, but just basically they're covering their cost.
Andy,
I think that would be a good scenario, because then that would give us an idea of, well, now, can you do it in 1 year? No, I don't think you can do it in 1 year. But at least it gives you an idea to look at it. Maybe that's what we should do. Maybe we should move to requiring some of the services to raise enough money to cover their costs. But it kind of gets back to what, Alan and Janet have said, is you kind of got to know what's their actual operating cost, not the stuff that they can't, the fixed costs, the administrative, they can't do anything about IT. I mean, they can't do anything about the legal costs. So
Andy,
what
your
does
time
it
is up.
actually take? So those are like two of the scenarios that I think
Andy,
would help.
Your time is up.
Sorry,
Thank you.
that's it.
All right. Dick, you're up.
I think Andy's got a great idea, because when we look at the profitability, the supposed profitability of these programs, we are picking up a lot of outside costs, such as depreciation and et cetera, and particularly financing charges. One of the things is, if we're looking at programs having to pay for themselves, they're no longer going to be able to be competitive pricing. And we have to decide, is competitive pricing something we offer to our residents? And we have to think in terms of what we need to do to increase people's involvement in CA. Every time somebody goes to a gym, they are adding value to their membership in the community. They're thinking about being part of a community. If we strip this thing down to swimming pools, well, actually, I think the sports and fitness programs pretty much pay for the swimming pools. At least that was my understanding. But if we strip away all this stuff, what do we have left? Who are we? Just a place that dredges the ponds? I just don't know what CA would stand for. And looking at this thing in terms of the individual programs just paying for their own costs without overhead, without some of these other administrative costs, might be a clearer way of understanding just what the true P&L is on them.
Thank you. Renee?
So I yield my time back to Andy because I want to hear the last scenario.
Okay.
There's no last scenario?
I'll wait to the end.
Go ahead.
No,
I'm okay with that if she wants to
Yeah,
cede
I
her
want to
time
hear
to
what the
you.
last scenario is.
Go, Renee, go.
No.
Renee, do you have something to
we're
share?
spending
No, I have nothing to share.
Ginny?
Okay. One, we keep saying we're serving our residents. We're serving more than that. We're serving members as well. Some of them are our residents, but a lot aren't. And we could fold without that other income coming in. So we do have to be competitive, and we have to keep that in mind. Second, I love the idea of five-year plan. You do that normally in business, especially capital drives me nuts if I don't see exactly what it's going to cost, including repairs, et cetera. Fixed costs I talked about a half hour ago. That's what I want to see, so I really know what reality testing is. But again, we really have to consider whether we're going to put the subsidy, which is close to $1 million for income qualified, into those fixed costs. And the last thing is we talk about, or at least I've heard a lot of this, what we can do for our residents. We're not in a vacuum. We're not in a silo. We have the county, we have the state, we have the private sector, we have others doing things for our residents as well. So I really want to know why we're doing something or what the staff suggests we stop doing, because everybody else is doing it in that area or that with that service. We don't need to do it. We're just duplicating effort at a cost that everybody else is doing. So I really want to learn more about that. I don't want us keep looking like we're in a silo or in a vacuum. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'm next on the list. I just wanted to do two clarifying points. Actually, what I was talking about was what Andy was suggesting. Alan, when I referred to overhead costs, I actually meant fixed costs. I didn't mean like the operational costs of the individual facilities. I meant those costs, such as the administrative expenses of the headquarters that are applied out to all of the facilities. So, so the administrative allocation, I think, is how Andy classified it, and that's more descriptive. I heard someone say something that made me think of what would it look like if we created, like if money were no object, what would our ideal budget look like? What would we want to be providing? And obviously that's a big thing, I think. I mean, I think there are a lot of things that have come through the board over time that have been covered, and I'm sure people would like to see continue to be covered. But if, so that, I think someone mentioned it with regard to the capital expenditures. If we had all the money in the world to have a, state-of-the-art facility or whatever, I mean, I think Dennis is pretty practical about that, so I will say that, like, in terms of, like, what do we need versus what could we have kind of thing. But I don't know how to structure that, but I think it sort of goes back to Renee's earlier point about how do we think bigger than, like, what would be the biggest impact that we would like to have, and then how do we apply that framework in a maybe more practical, scaled down way that enables us to manage our budget responsibly, but then achieve those things that we are seeing as our values. So I don't know the answer. That was rhetorical. All right, Jess.
So to sort of add on some of the scenarios that Andy and Alan mentioned, if there were a scenario that I wanted to see, it would be that everything that has a membership or that people pay for above and beyond their assessment charge should be self-sustaining, except pools. I think pools should be free for everybody. So that would be the scenario that I would want to see. And just, working in the nonprofit world, right, if you have a program that is continuing to, it may serve the mission, but if it's continuing to drain your finances, you let it go. And so I kind of look at it with that philosophy and with sort of what Jenny was saying. And I know this is an unpopular opinion because there are a lot of things that CA offers that I love and I think are beneficial, but they are things that are offered by Howard County or by private companies. When CA started, we were the only game in town. Now there are other people out there. So I would really like to see CA focusing on what people care about the most and what really, what the HOA stuff, the maintaining the open space, providing pools, and then everything else should be like a social enterprise. It should be making money to go back to fund the other programs. So that's my unpopular, but that's the scenario I would love to see. And if it means increasing the assessment, then it means increasing the assessment, which we haven't done in a bajillion years, so it seems. And I think if people didn't have to pay for pools, I think they'd be willing to pay more in their bill.
I agree.
And I'll get off my soapbox.
Okay, Andy and then Lakey. I put you back in. Did you want to finish what you?
No, let out.
Okay, Lakey, then you're up, and then Alan.
I'm keeping a running count, and I'm up to 4 scenarios, so I just want to make sure we reserve time to
Thank
kind
you.
of
I was just gonna
prioritize the
suggest
3. But just as a running count, I have 4. Otherwise, I did just want to have a couple clarifications around the 5-year projections. 2 of the categories, like capital budget, I think we frankly need some more guidance there, because I think the key is there's obviously in projections, there's always a ton of assumptions that you're making, right? So what is the priority, right? Because a 5-year capital budget that is prioritizing mitigating climate change looks very different than one that is only focused on repair and maintenance, right? So some guidance of like what are the priorities around what that projection would be, because I certainly understand the value of it. I guess my question is, we're back to kind of, at least in my view, we keep coming back to some of these value ideas of what is most important, because we can craft a budget that makes sure our facilities, have all the newest investment. When I say facilities, is that our neighborhood centers, is that our, sports and fitness facilities, is that our outdoor pavilion space. So there's some, value judgments, I think, inside of that would be really helpful to clarify. And then on fixed cost, I feel like I'm getting some context. I do know that was prepared as part of the budget last year. I've seen that documentation, so I'm not clear what we need in addition or different than that, so I'm happy to do it differently. But that information has been provided, but this conversation makes me feel like for some reason that wasn't digested, or are you just asking for an updated number? So I guess that's kind of a clarification.
The latter.
Alan, Renee, Tina, and then I'd like, and then Sherry, and then I would like to talk about actual scenarios that we decide on so that we can move forward.
Okay. I will say that I don't necessarily have to have us go out of our way to mitigate climate change. I do want us to go out of our way to make sure that we are not contributing to it. When I think about fixed costs, I do think we've had this conversation over and over again, and I just see fixed costs as proportional to our activity. So there'll be, other than the items that Andy mentioned, if we do more, it's going to cost more. We're going to have more fixed costs around it. So there's not a lot of fixed costs to keeping our lights on if we don't do a whole lot. And finally, I'm going to join Jess. We may have some differences around the edges, but that's a soapbox that I'd love for us to talk about. To me, it's a good starting place to say, if we think we're charging funds for it, we should be thinking about it becoming self-sustaining. I don't think that's 100% true, because I don't know for sure, for example, school-age services and some other things that we might decide fit enough with our other values that we're willing to require our assessment payers to pay for some of that. But I think that's a good starting point as a metric.
Renee?
So I'm going to come back to the capital budget. I love capital budgets. I think you have to throw the kitchen sink in the capital budget, but you can do it and categorize the expenses. So here's what our environmental improvements would be on the buildings. Here's what our capital costs would be for swimming pools. Here's what our capital costs would be if we renovated, 3 tot lots a year for 30 years. Neighborhood centers, if we renovated 1 or 2 a year, it's $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year for 20 years. I think you can break it down almost by category, and then below that, I think you have to put in, I don't know what categories the category thing is crazy anyways. Here's repairs. We think there's a repairs and maintenance number every year of $5 million or $4 million. It goes across the board. So that if we look at neighborhood centers, we're not just looking at it cost the villages, NCA, or whoever, we can argue back and forth, $2 million a year to keep them up. But we're also going to have to put in another $500,000 or $1 million to rebuild these neighborhood centers over some time period. I think we have to look at it more holistically than, here's the operating expenses and income, and it breaks even, but then there's the capital side. So do the two mesh together well.
Thank you. Tina?
I want to assert that the operations and maintenance and.
Can you get closer to your microphone, please?
I'm right on top of it.
No, yeah, now it's, if you turn that way, that's exactly what you need to do, right, like that.
Sorry. Is that better, Alan?
Yeah. I can hear you better. Alan, is that better?
Tina is talking, is that better?
It's still pretty quiet, but I'll listen close.
Yell.
If I get any closer, I'm gonna lick the thing.
That is not sanitary.
No, and I don't want to. And nobody wants that. Oh crap, don't get lost.
Operations.
Thank you. I wanted to make sure that the notion that operating expenses and environmentally, becoming environmentally sustainable to me are nigh unto the same thing. If I get any closer to this thing, I'm gonna be on top of it, or next to it. Does that help? So oh, well, that's.
Go toward the green light. Green light, green light.
Come towards the green light.
You gotta love seeing.
So anyways,
Big difference.
I'm sorry. Environmentalism and sustainability and operations to me need to be wedded together, snuggled up tight and as close as we can get them. And there was one other thing. I don't remember what it was now that I'm not looking at the
Batteries for the
microphone.
microphones.
Thank you. All right, Sherry. Go.
Okay. I think along with looking at capital and operating expenses, we really should be thinking through new sources of revenue. And this has to do with the demographics. This has to do with new ideas for programs, services that are cutting edge, that are, or that can be expansions of things that we're already doing and we do very well. Again, this came off of a conversation I was having with someone about all the disruptions with school activities. And we've had before and after school, school-age services that are based in the school system. But what would be the possibility of expanding to Columbia businesses, to our Columbia business parks, to new mixed-use housing and commercial, which could also have a place where CA could, let's go to the strengths of what we've had and then see if we might be able to develop some new streams of revenue. And that would provide for, so that might be, I don't know how we incorporate this into a new scenario, but I would love for us to have a brainstorming session where we throw everything up on the wall and just, blue sky it. Because I think there are folks that would have some very good ideas.
Thank you. Okay, so let's talk about scenarios. Lakey, can you tell us what your 4 scenarios are?
Well, I
only
mean,
got 3.
again, edit, as I had early the idea of all sport, fitness, so gyms, golf. I think Alan didn't say tennis. I would assume it would include racket sports as well, but would require self-sustaining. Try to do that over a short number of years. Do not include outdoor pools. Then I have just stay with current model. If all divisions with services, so this would be different because that would include community services. If all services that we provide covered their own operating costs, but minus out fixed cost and administrative overhead. And then if everything that has a membership is self-sustaining, which I read is slightly different, but maybe not, every service, because everyone is not based on a membership. It can be based on just a one-time fee. But everything that has a membership is self-sustaining, but not pools. But in this case, actually make pools free. That would be an additional step than just not including pools.
So just to
That's how I got
clarify that, I would say anything that people pay for at all, above and beyond.
Any kind of
So like if you're paying to go to the horse center, if you're paying to go to the art center, if you're paying for school-age services, it doesn't have to be a membership. But anything that we're charging for above and beyond the assessment, that's where I was trying to get with that.
Okay. But I do see those as separate than
Yes.
all services, not covering operating, because then putting in that pools are free, that's a significant cost center. So, obviously that would have a different kind of outcome. So those were the 4.
Okay, so let's, Andy, I'm assuming in an as-is scenario, we would base that on 2019? I mean, how would we
Yeah, well, we'll
do
leave it up
that?
to staff.
Okay,
I mean,
we'd have
but
to figure
basically,
out
what
a-
if we just kind of kept going the way we have been?
Proportionate budget to what we
Yeah.
have typically seen.
And I think that's a good thing to start,
But
because it does a comparison.
yeah, you're going back to 2014, but, I mean, if you go,
Not
if you look
14,
at
19.
the figures, it's going to take us years to get there.
Well, I said proportionately. So whatever our annual charge is, but yeah.
The annual charge, yeah, but the sports and fitness, I mean,
I think what we're saying here is, if we just keep going the way we've been going
as of
and
today.
figure out what would most likely happen this coming year if, we just set the thing on cruise control, where would we be?
That's a good idea.
Okay, Alan, did you have something to say on the scenarios?
Yes.
Okay.
I would like to see, I don't know if what the right word is, some modularization of the scenarios. I think might actually make it easier to put them together. So for example, there'd be a very different cost to pay for Supreme Sports as versus to pay for tennis courts. So I'd like to know how much we are, even if it's a rough, so, always assumption built in, but what are we right now expecting everybody to pay in order to keep those tennis courts open? And what are we expecting people to pay in order to keep the gyms open? And so on, and I don't know what else, those sports parks and so on. Because it may be that we'll decide that something, there's a combination of factors. Cost is one of them. Value to the community is another one that might help us make some choices in terms of how we put together a scenario from the modules.
Tina, did you have something specific to scenarios?
I would value a competitive analysis. So if I'm looking at those scenarios, for example, fitness centers, there are other fitness centers in Columbia. Is anybody else running teen centers? How many other golf courses are there? Because sometimes I feel like I'm making decisions in a vacuum. And to the points about, we are also part of the broader Howard County, that's valuable to consider. And there's some real value to, if you live in Columbia, your swimming pool outdoors is free all summer and the paths are open to you all the time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is part of what you pay for when you live in Columbia. So I don't know if that's possible. I took Jess's comment about, when we started, there were no gyms and now they're bloody everywhere. How do you balance that?
Lakey, do you have any feedback?
I would just make a general statement that I can commit that we'll look at some competitive context. I can't, inside of our timeline that we have, commit to have a full competitive analysis across every service area. That is just plain not feasible.
Okay.
But I think we can have a competitive context that, which I do think is relevant. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Sherry and Dick, did you have your hand? Okay,
Let's move along.
Okay.
Okay.
Is this scenario specific? We're talking scenarios only? Okay, I just want to make sure.
I'm wondering if we could have a scenario where programs and services and various pieces of memberships are paid for separately. The idea of putting together from a menu of programs and services. I'm thinking of the current zeitgeist seems to be only pay for what you need, if you remember the commercial.
I think that's a commercial.
And this is something that, in fact, was brought up many years ago. It was never gamed out. to see what that would actually involve. But I wonder if that would not bring in a greater proportion of people in Columbia if they can choose what they want for what fits themselves and their families at the moment.
And I would like to recommend everybody read the book Paradox of Choice, and you might change your mind on that. Any.
Too busy laughing on that one. Go ahead and get somebody.
It's the truth. Read it, good read. You might think differently.
My question was, I'm having a Tina moment there for a second. Everybody's talking about pools. I assume being free. I assume you're only talking about outdoor pools, but there are indoor pools. There are 5 of them, and they serve. They're very valuable to a lot of people that don't use the outdoor pools. They serve different purposes, et cetera. We're not going to make those free as well. Okay, I'm just.
Okay, let's get back to the
One other
scenarios.
question on
Yeah.
Make sure I have my right pool.
So during the discussion, people brought up the idea of what are we not doing? So something we would add, and no one has mentioned stopping.
Stopping?
Is there anything that out of hand is like, we just should not do that? Again, that rises to a level anybody wants to put forward as a scenario we would consider, so.
Yes.
I just haven't heard much of that.
Oh, wait, Jenny's got some.
Yeah. Okay, so
Yeah.
we need to decide on scenarios. That's what we're focusing on. So we have one scenario. Let's talk about a proportionate scenario. Who is in favor? I just want to get a quick thumbs up, thumbs down of who would like to have as a baseline a proportionate budget to what we have seen typically.
In an ongoing.
Doing what we've always done, like. the way we've
Correct,
always done.
like as though
I
nothing
think
else
that's a
has
baseline. I
changed.
think it's important to compare to the
Okay.
baseline.
Anybody opposed to that?
Can we do that and break out the pools from everything, even in the baseline?
No, let's just do a baseline study,
Okay,
and then we can play with other things.
okay.
I thought the
I'm not clear on the purpose. We already have that. That's what we've
Not
got
for-
already.
Not for next year.
We're talking fiscal year '23.
Well, that just seems so slight a change. Anyway,
Correct, but that's,
That's the point.
I don't want that to take up one of our scenario slots.
that will take up a scenario, yeah. That's a legitimate point. Okay, so the next one up is the idea that we would have a scenario where all sports and fitness, golf, tennis, is sports park included in that scenario, Alan, that you were suggesting?
Well, like I said, I'd like some modularization on all that, but because I'd want to know how much each of those impacts the
So
bottom line. And
I'll
I think
just-
for me, I just want to say, Lakey, this idea is a stop doing, because what we've been doing is allowing residents, we've been requiring everybody to pay for certain things, and that's the stop doing. Stop having residents, everybody pay for certain things.
So I'd just like to point out that I think we would all love to have a dashboard where we can just play with things and come up with our ideal scenario. That is not reality here. So I think the modular idea is a great one, but it's very complicated to do, and I don't think it's feasible for the folks we have working on our budget and the resources that CA has for us to expect that to be a reality. So that's why we're trying to get it to 3 scenarios.
I'm not clear why that's so, given that they're going to have to come up with that. How much does it cost to run these things? And that's really all, and how much income do they provide us?
Because
So as
every
long as we
time
have
you
those
move dollars
figures
from one thing to another thing, it changes it everywhere. Because where do you take it from? Then you have to make a decision. So if you say that this costs this much, as soon as you shift it, then where do you shift it from or to? So everything is a domino effect, all of it interrelated.
That's sort of my point, yes.
But you can't do it like this isn't Legos, you can't take, here are your swimming pools, all the blue Legos, and, because if you take one away, where's that Lego going? It has to go somewhere
It's
else.
about going. It's about how much does it cost to keep our tennis courts operating, and how much money do we get?
Does anybody else have any suggestions for how to structure this conversation? Because I'm clearly failing.
Yes, I do.
Go for it.
I'm getting nervous about how we're trying to à la carte our programs. And when we think about this, that's just going to be an administrative nightmare if we put a price tag on everything. And the other problem is it's going to be very difficult to budget, because until people actually sign up for these things, you're not going to know how much money's coming in. So we have package programs, and I think for budgeting purposes, we should stick with our package programs.
Thank you. So we are out of time. So do you have a scenario suggestion?
I have a suggestion.
Okay, excellent.
That while I appreciate all the expense scenarios, that there needs to be a group of people that sits down and looks at how we could raise money outside of this organization to run some of these programs. Okay? You can go to USTA and get money to teach tennis to at-risk youth. You can go to USA Swimming and get money to teach swimming to at-risk youth. You can go, President Obama has a philanthropic right here in Maryland to give money for at-risk youth. You can get money for after-school care if you tutor at-risk youth. So is there a way to raise money outside of the normal budget process to make up some of these deficits? And I say yes, but it would take some legwork.
Even for a C4?
Pardon?
Even for a C4?
I'm saying start a paper-clipped organization, a 501c3.
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
Okay, well, I think that's a separate scenario.
I think it is the scenario, because we're beating up the same dollars.
If this is not about a
It's the
specific scenario.
It is.
Okay.
I heard what Lakey said, that we haven't offered anything in terms of a stop scenario, but I respectfully disagree. We were saying before that if somebody else is doing it, CA staff needs to look at why are we doing it. Also, like we stopped transit a long time ago. The ponds, we now have the county taking over some of the ponds that we were paying for all along. Overhead passes, we're now finally getting, so yes, that is a scenario that I think we have to take seriously. What can we stop doing that somebody else should be doing? And, okay.
Andy?
Like, could you read those other three scenarios real quick, if you could just give it a synopsis? Yeah, the three that we're talking.
So, sport fitness, if we were to say all of that needed to be self-sustaining, but don't include outdoor pools. Then we have, if all divisions with some kind of service, however it's paid for, minus were self-sustaining, but minusing out operating cost and, I'm sorry, to cover operating costs, minus out fixed cost administrative. And then if everything that is paid for as a service is self-sustaining, with none of that pulled out, and we made pools free.
Okay, well, your second and fourth scenario are very similar.
Yep.
I mean, basically, the fourth scenario kind of covers the second. So I would suggest we go with the fourth scenario. And then I also suggest we go with the third scenario. And that gives us three scenarios.
Any objections?
So I'm sorry, can you just clarify for me what they would be? The first one would be the sort of as-is autopilot. The second one would be the one where we're pulling out the fixed costs. Is that what you're talking about? The depreciation and the admin stuff?
No, it's sports and fitness.
Right.
Second one was sports and fitness become self-sustaining without including outdoor.
Okay,
We're
okay.
rolling that into number four.
Rolling that, into number 4.
Rolling that into number 4.
So it would be baseline, keep going, relatively as is. It would be, all services would have to cover their own operating costs, but we would pull out fixed costs, administrative costs.
Okay.
And then the last one would be, all services would be self-sustaining and outdoor pools are free.
Okay, got it.
Okay,
I move we go there. Oh, no, well, no, we can't vote, so.
we're not voting, but we're going to go with it anyway.
Finished, yeah. We're done.
Sherry?
Yeah, I don't think the second one and the fourth one are the same at all. Sports and fitness, as its own animal, is different from other programs, services, and things of that kind.
I agree with
And so I think we're comparing apples and oranges here. I would not put them together.
Well, but you're going to get that in the fourth scenario, because the fourth scenario will show you sports and fitness, will show you
There's
community
nothing that
services.
says that. There's nothing that says that.
Okay, well, we can say that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, I agree with you, Sherry, that they are. So for instance, I would be willing to subsidize something that may be an event or a community service or something like that, even if it's a membership-based thing. And so I think the insight that that provides us is what are we looking at? Because it may be that we're willing to subsidize it this much, but not this much.
Okay,
And
all right, so
so-
I get your point. As long as we apply that through the entire process without lumping everything together.
Exactly.
Okay.
I think you made a good point.
And I just want to say that that's what I meant by modular. So it sounds like we're in agreement on that.
Okay.
Well, hallelujah. Let's move on. All right. Thank you, everyone, for that robust discussion. Next up, tot lot policy. Dennis, are you with, oh, there we go.
Yes, I am.
Hi.
So I had four, are we ready for me?
We are. Go for it. Are you ready for us?
I am ready. So I have 4 team members with me in the office tonight, and that's Nick Moonihan, Rob Plummer, Jason Heath, and Steve Boswell. And what we'd like to do is make the presentation, hold the questions till the end. But I'd also like to say that we have not had a comprehensive tot lot management plan forever. And as far as I know, we've never had one. So this is the beginning of creating one, and I understand that this is important to the community, important to the board members, the support staff. And so I know that we didn't answer every question that you might have, but we're going to give it a try and get started here. Nick, you're up.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Nick Moonihan, the Open Space Operations Manager, and myself and Dennis and the CIP management team, Rob Plummer, Director of Capital Improvements, Steve Boswell, and Jason Heath put this presentation together. We don't think it's going to answer every question about our tot lot replacement plan, but we think it's a great start and lays out the process to move the replacement plan forward. So it took a while to put this together over a difficult, challenging year, and I know it's late already, and you guys have already covered a lot, so I'll try to get through it as quickly as possible so that there can be some questions at the end. Okay, so our objective is to provide information regarding the CA tot lot inventory, basically background information that can be used to inform the replacement policy. We'll cover historical perspective, the inventory, ongoing operating and maintenance costs, existing conditions, what is our intermediate replacement strategy that we're employing currently, long-term capital costs, the proposed plan or process, and as part of that, we'll review some objective criteria that can aid in decision-making, and then the final action items to move things forward. Oops, sorry. Tot lots in Columbia were originally intended to supplement the natural amenities of the open space by providing areas where concentrated play could take place. And the tot lots from their inception was originally geared towards preschoolers, so ages 2 to 5. From 67 to 74, there was 88 tot lots constructed Columbia-wide. And I pulled this out of the archives. I actually thought it was quite interesting that was nearly 4 times at the time, 4 times the average than other communities throughout the United States. And that was based on tot lots per number of dwellings. An additional 87 tot lots were constructed between 1975 and 2010. Initially, they ranged in size from 600 feet to 2,000 square feet. But over time, the safety standards change, and so the footprint of the tot lots have had to increase in size. So they're really all right at 2,000 square feet or larger in many cases today. In 1996 is when you started to see what we term as special tot lots. So these are pre-manufactured, more in line with a playground. They were typically reserved for neighborhood center parks. So the first one was at Stevens Forest. And there's others such as Dockside at Elkhorn that is not part of a neighborhood park. That also allowed us to consider ADA accessibility because there's parking lots tied to them, and also geared towards an older age range of 2 to 12-year-olds. So tot lots served an important role in attracting young families to Columbia in the early days, and we believe they continue to serve an important role today. So in the upper left corner, that picture is the standard typical CA tot lot fort. You climb up and you slide down. And in the lower right picture is an example of the pre-manufactured tot lots that are being installed as part of our intermediate replacement strategy. This is Star Path and Owen Brown in the bottom right. A big factor that has also changed is in the early days of Columbia, Howard County Rec and Parks didn't have a major footprint when it came to playgrounds in Columbia. And so this picture is a drone picture of a mega destination playground that is Blandare Park. There are actually 17 Howard County Rec and Parks playground, like parks. There's actually 20 playgrounds within those areas. This map shows the distribution of all of those playgrounds. So we have, and this was the slide that was added to this presentation. So the red dots are the CA tot lots, and there's 175 of those. The green triangles are Howard County Recreation and Park playgrounds. And as I noted in the previous slide, there's actually 20 unique playgrounds. Because like at Blandare Park, there's 3 actual playgrounds, and Cedar Lane, there's 2. And then the yellow circles are the elementary schools, which all have playgrounds also. And so there's 18 in and around playgrounds. And some of it was a little bit of a judgment call. You know, obviously these, there's some Howard County playgrounds that are near the edge of Columbia, but not really accessible to Columbia residents. So those were not counted. And you can see where a lot of CA tot lots are clustered tightly together in the villages and neighborhoods. And the bigger open areas are either out parcels or the Middle Patuxent environmental area, or, you know, the hospital and college campus area. This graph shows the distribution of the tot lots throughout Columbia. I won't go through every village, but this just gives you that breakdown. So we have, we think tot lots are important, and we have a lot of them, and we have to maintain them, and we have to maintain them safely. And that involves weekly maintenance visits. Actually, I take a step back. The open space maintenance team completes the operating and maintenance of the tot lots, where the capital improvements team does the repairs and design and replacement. And so collectively, we manage the tot lot system. So from a maintenance perspective, we conduct weekly maintenance visits, which involves the trash collection, safety checks, redistributing the mulch, routine cleaning, minor repairs, and mulch replacements. That's where we dig out completely the 12 inches of mulch and replace with brand new play surface mulch. And that our standard is 25 sites per year, but it's largely dependent on the actual condition and what the inspections come out as. So we have more thorough quarterly inspections and the annual full structural inspection or audit that is completed by capital improvements. And then, of course, that informs the annual repairs and replacements that are made. Some of you may recognize this slide. Just before the pandemic, I presented to the board the open space standard of care guidelines. So this is the top page out of that document. The pandemic certainly interrupted our full rollout of this, but this gives you a further breakdown on how we have to manage and maintain the tot lots. And in the resource section in the lower right is all the different standards and resources that we use to inform our practices. So all that costs money, of course. And when you break it down, the annual cost to a cost per tot lot, it's actually only $5,733, but we have 175 of these. So the total annual maintenance cost for tot lots is just over $1 million. One of the major challenges that we have in maintaining the tot lots is the age of them. 97 tot lots are actually 20 years or older. 63 are between 10 and 20 years old. That's including the 10 pre-manufactured neighborhood center tot lots and one at Lake Elkhorn. And the pre-manufactured certainly have a larger life expectancy. 11 are between 3 and 10 years old. But in 2004, the federal guidelines for wood preservatives changed. And so the lumber that was used to build a lot of those 11 are built with lumber with less effective wood preservatives. And that's been a big challenge for us. And 4 are 3 years old or newer, and those are all using pre-manufactured play structures. Similar to the picture, the then and now picture slide. So this, the traditional wooden CA fort structures, they've been failing either because of their age from the early inception of them, or they were rebuilt in that time period where the lumber treatment processes were less effective, and that's caused accelerated rot and bug infestation, and was a big driving force of why we moved from wooden to pre-manufactured metal play structures. We are having the same issues with the wooden swings. And the picture on the right, most people wouldn't see anything wrong with it and would be happy to set their toddler in those bucket swings, me included, until I started managing playgrounds, the maintenance of playgrounds. And so this is the picture on your left is the very same wooden swing. We have to peel the mulch away, and this is a high-tech rot detector called a screwdriver, and we push that in, and obviously if it's soft and goes in, and then oftentimes we see ants pull out. This isn't readily seen by most people, and sometimes requires partial excavation from the post to even detect. Sometimes this is occurring below the mulch line. And so if the rot is serious enough, we have to close that play structure. And again, we've replaced quite a few wooden swing structures. There's actually 18 pre-manufactured metal swings out in open space today. So our intermediate replacement strategy, this has been ongoing for just the last few tot lot replacements. It's based on safety inspections, the safety standards, and estimated repair costs. We certainly don't want to go in and replace a tot lot that can be repaired cost effectively. We consider that's at that time that it's being replaced is when we would consider ADA accessibility and inclusive play. We've standardized the play equipment for efficiency in the space planning and design, the purchasing of the structure, and the maintenance of operations. That really helps with the training of the staff also, who's out there maintaining and inspecting them. Our strategy has been to replace wooden play structures with pre-manufactured powder-coated metal and plastic units, such as the Rascal and the Firefly. The picture in the then and now was of a Rascal, and there's some more pictures to come. And we generally maintain that intended age group of 2 to 5 year olds. Any existing special tot lots, and this has not come up yet, that are already pre-manufactured structures would be replaced when warranted with a similar size pre-manufactured structure that serves 2 to 12-year-olds. They're all generally larger, more in line with what you would call a playground, not a tot lot. And then we consider additional play activities for a larger age range, 2 to 12-year-olds, when space, budget, and topography allows. This is a picture of the Rascal, and there's 8 play activities jam-packed into this unit, where the wooden fort structures are really 2. You climb up it and you slide down the slide. And so there's different various activities, climbing activities, the poles and the slide, and some little activities with underneath the structure as well. Some of the additional play activities that we consider that, and some appeal to a larger age range, is the climbing structures. This is the Cosmic Warp, and then certainly a lot of our tot lots have spring animals for toddler age. We got seesaws and play panels, and as simple as these play panels seem, they come in all different various configurations. They can help add a little unique element to the tot lots. And I have a toddler currently, and he loves these things. You know, it can just be anything from tic-tac-toe to different things you flip to make a puzzle, all kind of different ones. And we have several different variations out in open space. And when all possible, when space and topography allow, we replace the swing units with a double bay 4-seat swing. Sometimes that's not achievable, and a 2-bay swing is installed. And this also appeals to 2 to 12-year-old. I also have an 11-year-old who still loves to swing on the playground. So if there's not other activities at that playground for him, this is usually his go-to, either a climbing structure or a swing. And so the cost for the replacement using the pre-manufactured structures, the Firefly unit is a little smaller than a Rascal and is just under $68,000. Now that includes the removal of that wooden replacement tot lot that's being replaced. And then the Rascal is right around $73,000. And of course, that's subject to change depending on the accessibility of the site, the weather at the time we're replacing it, topography, and of course the material costs at the time of replacement. But these are average costs. So we evaluated a replacement schedule comparing pre-manufactured tot lots with wooden tot lots. So when we look at pre-manufactured tot lots, and we have experience with these because of those tot lots that were built, our oldest pre-manufactured tot lot is Stevens Forest that was installed in 1996, and Elkhorn at Dockside was installed in 2005. And we can go on a 25-year replacement cycle that would require 7 tot lots being replaced per year, which is an average annual replacement cost of $511,000 for all 7 of those tot lots. Comparing it to a wood tot lot, we would need to be on an 8-year replacement cycle because of those less effective wood preservatives. It would require 22 tot lots replaced per year at an annual cost of $1.4 million to keep pace with the useful life of those tot lots. Now we have a couple different funding buckets. So category 3 funding is used for capital repairs that are typically not part of a full replacement. And that is about $150,000 per year. And we would expect that cost would go down as more tot lots are replaced. Category 2 funding is used for the full replacements. And as I noted, to be on a 25-year replacement schedule, that would require $511,000 per year in Category 2 funding. And the FY22 Category 2 funding is $350,000, just to note that. So the proposed plan or proposed way forward, the process that we are recommending would be to adopt the intermediate replacement strategy as the long-range replacement plan. And that would include standardizing the play structures, replacing them with pre-manufactured units, the Rascal or equivalent, and continue to use Category 2 funding. The funding requirements would be $511,000 per year, and that would likely vary from year to year. That would be to place us on a 25-year replacement plan. CA board approval and Category 1 funding would be required for tot lots that fall outside of the current prefabricated play structure program. So anything that would be considered a special tot lot, or if the village was requesting something larger than the typical replacement, staff would use this objective criteria and provide that information to the board to help facilitate that decision. So we would look at a lot of different elements that I'll review in the next slide. Decisions regarding consolidation of tot lots or removal of a tot lot due to duplication of service area and other factors. So if CA identifies an opportunity to remove a tot lot because it is in a duplication of service area, we would also use that very same criteria and provide that to the village and CA board for approval. When a tot lot is not in disrepair, there's not a compelling reason to remove it. So that would only be if that tot lot was ready to be replaced. So the objective criteria that we've come up with is the travel time, walking distance to a tot lot, the environmental impact, safety and sight lines, the visibility to others. Many of our tot lots are secluded, and the more secluded they are, the more they're opened up to non-park-like activities. That's where we find beer bottles and other stuff. We would also consider ADA accessibility, maintenance equipment access. Some of these tot lots are not easy to get to, even for us. Size and topography, the age of that tot lot, and the tot lot service area. And we define the tot lot service area as the dwellings or residential homes within a 10-minute walk. And that 10-minute walk is a pretty well-known metric that many parks and recreation associations and jurisdictions use. And that would be a 10-minute walk without major barriers. So not crossing a highway or, it would have to utilize our pathway system and everything. Safely get there. And so we actually did that. We put our tot lot locations into a GIS system, and these are called isochrones. So anywhere in these blobs, these blue blobs represent CA tot lots. If you're within those, you can see there's multiple tot lots within each blob. That means you can walk to many tot lots within a 10-minute walking distance. The orange is Howard County Rec and Parks, and this is only Columbia west of 29. It's a lot to fit on one screen. And the purple is closed, CA closed tot lots or partially closed. And even though there's quite a few tot lot names within those purple blobs, there's only one tot lot closed within those isochrones. So that just goes to show you if Harper's Choice 04 was closed, you would have 6 or 7 other tot lots that you could walk to within that same 10-minute or less time frame. So this is just an example of how we would use that objective criteria. So the process for moving forward and what we would ask at some point would be to approve that intermediate plan, including standardizing the play structures using the pre-manufactured Rascal or equivalent and the Category 2 funding. Approve the specialty tot lot funding using Category 1 CA board initiative funding through that approval process. One thing to note, like the playground at Dockside at Elkhorn would be, to replace that tot lot would be $250,000. So that would eat up quite a bit of that Category 2 funding that is needed to replace many more tot lots, standard tot lots. And to approve the objective criteria that would be used to assess tot lots moving forward in these scenarios. So that would be whether we identify a need to add a tot lot, to remove a tot lot, or to expand a tot lot beyond what we define as the standard tot lot, which would be $85,000 or slightly less. And that concludes the presentation, and I think we're happy to answer some questions.
Thank you. We have Alan in the queue.
Great, thank you. Great presentation, very complete. A couple of questions and a couple of suggestions. Just, I think I know, but when you say a metal structure, you're not talking about the swings being metal. You're talking about the structure being metal and the swings still being plastic or whatever they're.
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
The $1 million or slightly over $1 million that you laid out the cost, was there any sort of overhead allocation to that, or was that just sort of actual costs of maintaining, running these things?
Yeah, there certainly is some overhead built into that, but not all of it. So it would be very difficult to parse out the fuel for the trucks. Because they're doing several jobs at the same time. But it involved using our blended rate, which does tie in management's salary. So it is pretty comprehensive, but there's certainly some overhead that could not be included.
Great, thank you. Just to demonstrate my ignorance, how do we not allow people to use a tot lot? You said we got 6 that are closed to the public. Where, I don't know each one, where are they, but why are they, and how do we do that?
We take the swings off the swing sets, or we take the ladders off, or we put barriers up to entry on the forts.
So they're closed for that, they're not closed because they're private and only certain people get to use them. They're just out of commission right now, is what you're saying.
Correct.
I see, that was not clear to me. I thought they were like restricted use for only certain people.
Understood.
And so in your criteria, I would love to see some attention, and maybe I missed it, to the amount of use that a particular tot lot gets. And I get that that's, we can only estimate that, and it's like traffic studies, you do what you can to figure out use. And then more specifically, I'd like to think about our audience from a need and diversity point of view. I think it is possible, I don't know this for sure, but I have a hunch that there are certain, whether it's neighborhoods or areas or groups of people or whatever it is, who have access to other forms of recreation, for example. And even though they may live within 10 minutes of the tot lot, don't use the tot lot, and others who don't have access to such things and may rely on the tot lots in a greater, to a greater extent. So I'd like to see something that ties those things into our criteria for keeping or creating a tot lot. Thank you.
Okay, Ginny?
Yeah. When you say within travel distance, dwelling within 10 minutes, Nick?
Yes.
Hello? Yeah. Do you mean to another tot lot?
From that residential home to any tot lot.
Any tot lot, CA tot lot, okay.
CA tot lot, yeah.
Go ahead. Okay, what I'm asking is, say the tot lot was right near Bland Air Park, and the tot lot would cost $85,000 to be repaired or whatever, and it also maybe some environmental problems, et cetera. Why don't you consider Bland Air Park with tremendous resources are available?
We
5 minutes, perhaps.
Yeah, we absolutely would. So we put in the 10-minute walk to Bland Air Park also. And so there are a couple tot lots in that area that would not have to cross a major road that doesn't have an underpass or an overpass. And that would be an example where the staff, quite possibly, if we felt like the service area was being duplicated, whether that was within a CA tot lot or a Howard County Rec and Parks playground, we potentially could bring that to the village and the board for a recommendation or approval to remove that tot lot.
Okay, I thought that was the intent, but I'm concerned somebody might literally interpret this as 10 minutes to another tot lot. So what you're talking about is something that I understood it should be as well, and much broader. It's not just the county park. It could be an elementary school that has a lot of things available right next door. So,
That's
okay,
right.
thank you.
Dick?
Yes, this is a great presentation, a lot of detail, I like it. I just wanted to say that recently a tot lot was put in Dorothy, and it's got an enormous business. Every time I walk by it, there are kids playing on it. It's a huge neighborhood amenity. We have a lot of young families who've been attracted to the neighborhood, and I think this is part of why. So I just want to say that these tot lots are an amenity that we really need to maintain.
Thank you. Any other questions? So Nick, what would you like the board to provide? Would you like our input in terms of what we see as potential criteria for assessing tot lots? Or do you already have something in mind that we may be seeing at a later time?
So if I could, so we laid out what we thought were the general guidelines, and we could make them more specific and bring them forward. So we'd like the board to approve the general principle that tot lots would be moved forward under the intermediate plan, which is the up to $85,000, that anything that's a specialty tot lot or a request that exceeds that would have to come to the CA board for their approval. And as I said before, we've never had a comprehensive management plan for tot lots, and it has been haphazard, and that's been a challenge looking at it going forward because they haven't been treated equally in the past. And they're not all going to be treated equally going forward, but there should be some consistency. So we'd like to use those objective criteria to create the guidelines that we model a plan for moving forward under.
And so I got you guys. Well, I just had one follow-up question. I was curious if a village wanted to consolidate, would there be consideration for, so if a village said, hey, we have these 10 that aren't really well utilized, can we combine them into a mega playground? Like, will that be something that will be part of that policy?
I think that's a great idea, as long as it's 10.
Okay, well, we would like some guidance on the minimum number that could be consolidated to make it worthwhile.
Yes, because if it's 2, the math doesn't work. But yes,
Gotcha.
That could be part of that as well.
Yeah, or maybe not mega, but a little bit bigger.
A playground, something more age for a wider audience.
All right, so Renee, Sherry, then Lakey.
So I would like to put this on the agenda for board approval, as is. I think the nitty-gritty of the objective criteria isn't really of a concern to me. I trust the staff to make good decisions. And I think next month is a good month to do it. Let's get it.
September, we don't have meetings in August.
September. Let's just do this. I think as it sits, it's good policy. It's not, there's no procedures and nitty-gritty. Let's leave that to the staff and let's get this underway.
Sherry and then Lakey.
Yeah, I'd just like to ask that we have enough time to run it by the villages so that we get some feedback. And I guess my other question was, Dennis, has this been kid tested? We have two models, only 2 models for change. One of the things I've noticed over time is that there seem to be fewer and fewer kids playing outside. So I think in keeping with our fitness and wellness perspective here, we're, something that would encourage older kids to get out and be in the open space is a way of building support and comfort for being in open space. So this is actually a serious question about getting some feedback from kids about whether these two models are things that are attractive to them and how they would respond. So again, that may be just, if we get some pictures or something, we can take this to the villages, ask people to bring their kids, literally, and get some feedback from them.
And keep in mind the age group this is geared to. This is geared to 2 to 5, these specific play structures. So this is not geared to a 10-year-old necessarily, although they may find something they want to do if they are there with a sibling. But primarily for the 2 to 5-year-old age group.
Okay.
But we have catalog cuts that we can get to you easily.
All right, so for older children, we're really looking at something that's larger and more extensive.
And that may already be in place at a county playground.
I see, okay.
And there's also the swings, and some tot lots, there are space to do a climbing structure. And then we also consider what we call play fields that are adjacent to the tot lots as part of that tot lot too. And those are not areas that we want to let grow up into meadows or reforestation sites. We want to preserve them as play fields. When I take my 4 kids to the playground, there's some playing on the little structures, and then me and my older kids are kicking a soccer ball or throwing a football and utilizing the whole area. So I think that's
Frisbee,
an important
right?
aspect.
Yeah, no, I know. That's great. Okay, thank you.
Lakey, then Ellen, then Ginny.
I just wanted to follow up that I think the big request in front of the board is the process piece more than anything. So I guess similar to what Renee said about, I think criteria, we can continue to be more detailed on that, but staff had really worked to kind of flesh that out. One of the things I just did want to make clear, and Dennis said it early on, is that there has not really been a program or process around tot lots. It has been ad hoc, for over 50 years. So this is meant to be a step towards wrapping a process around it, but some of the questions that have come up, I think actually bring up a much bigger landscape that does need to be discussed, which is, are we offering it for multiple ages? How would we go about doing that? The cost is very different. It would necessitate taking something off the maintenance side, right? Pulling some offline in order to reallocate that funding, not just from a capital investment standpoint, as we talked about earlier, but also from an operating cost. So I think that is a bigger conversation, but this is really a step to get us towards having a process that staff can administer, and hopefully we can get most of the replacement through that process, and it would really be a rare exception that something would be outside of that cost structure. That's kind of the hope for being able to maintain it over time.
Okay, we're out of time, so Alan, if you could be quick.
Sure. I'm really appreciating the policy and the specific policy and the idea of having a policy. I would also like to see, and I think the last conversation touched on it, some flexibility and intention to see where there are multiple tot lots really near each other and there's this proper kind of space to think of, rather than duplicating the same tot lot multiple times in the same footprint, but think of different things, maybe a little bit different age range, so that we're thinking a little more holistically rather than simply tot lot by tot lot.
Okay, Ginny and then Jess, and then we're wrapping up.
Okay, real quick. The staff actually, for the benefit of some of the board members here, the staff, Dennis's staff, have actually done a study of Oakland Mills that this board authorized as a pilot. And one recommendation was, for example, one tot lot be closed that was just in a really bad location, not really used by kids, but used by other significant others selling, you know what, drugs. So they came in actually with a proposal to not only close it, but what you could do with that, like a pollinator garden, et cetera. And it really went over very well with the board. So it's not like we're going to, the CA staff, I think, is saying, close the tot lot and forget about it. They come in with constructive, working with the board, constructive alternatives. So I see it as a very positive process.
Jess?
Yeah, quick question for Dennis and Nicholas. There's nothing mentioned in here about sandboxes. And I'm wondering if there is a plan to just start eliminating sandboxes as top lots are replaced. And I do have a second question. I guess my second question is more of a comment. I've never known a kid that has enjoyed a spring animal. They just hit their head on them and get hurt. So I would encourage, if there's any other alternative, I know I've seen in some tot lots, like the plastic cars that will hold 2 kids. I know they take up a little more room, but I sort of feel like a spring animal is just a throwaway of space. But I am curious about the sandbox things, because I have heard several complaints about that.
So we are definitely phasing out sandboxes, and when we have had critter cams on our tot lots, the most activity in a sandbox is from critters.
Cats. Yeah.
It's not the.
And they're not doing good things in the sandboxes. So we are definitely phasing them out.
Turn off devices, please.
Right.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Nick.
Thank
A
you.
lot of food for thought, and we will get this on an agenda. At the next BOC meeting.
Hey, Janet, I would just like to make a quick point of order. I'd like to see us find a better way to ensure that everybody who wants to speak has the opportunity, where there seems to be several people who speak multiple times on an issue. And I feel like we had talked about having something where everybody had the opportunity to speak first, then people could speak again. So just something
Well,
to
if people
sort of,
don't raise their hand to speak, then I continue letting people speak. If somebody else would like to manage that process, I'm all for it.
okay.
It's very difficult to keep track of who hasn't
Get it.
spoken, so.
I get it.
Anyone who hasn't spoken, what I would encourage you to do is wave your arm vehemently
Or frantically?
at me. Yeah. Well, because Jess, you actually sit there and play with your ring like this. And so I never know if you're waving to be called on or playing.
My hand gets tired if I hold it up like this for 15 minutes while I'm
You don't need to hold it up the whole time. Just, if your hand's just like this, I'm not sure if you actually have your hand up or not, so. But yes, I'm open to suggestions, but it is difficult to manage all of those pieces
I would
when
just
trying to
encourage
keep
the
things on
people who
track.
are speaking multiple times that maybe you should wait and let other people have the opportunity to speak before chiming in a second time on the same topic. Some of us take a few minutes to gather our thoughts before we are ready to speak on an issue.
Thank you. All right, that is the end of our agenda for tonight. May I have a motion to adjourn?
To adjourn.
Second.
Jenny moves, Dick seconds. Any objections?
No.
Excellent. Meeting concluded at